Welcome to Suzanne's studio. I'm Suzanne Barnett, your host, and tonight I am so honored and pleased and thrilled to introduce Ginger Summit, who she's actually a Renaissance woman, and she loves doing folk art, as you could see. So, that's it. Welcome, Ginger Summit.
Thank you, my friend Suzanne. It's nice to be here with you. And I'm thrilled to introduce to the public more about gourds and what you can do with gourds. Gourds have been around. Gourds are one of the first 5 domesticated plants in the world. They were probably domesticated in Africa or in the Near East. But they spread naturally throughout the world. So they have been found in artifacts and tombs around the world in every culture. So that now they weren't well preserved just because they were often eaten by rodents or else they rotted. But even so, if you go into museums around the world, you will find remnants or artifacts using gourds. And that's what makes them so much fun. We can find how they were used historically, and then artists today are bringing their own talents and turning them into absolutely beautiful works of art. And so that's what we're here today to show you just how they have been used in the past and how we're using them now.
Well, I really want to say this, but you and Jim
White-S
were 2 of the most talented, noted people in the world with gourds, and you're self-taught. I've got to tell that to my wonderful audience. So well, you go ahead.
All right. One of the things, gourds have been used by artists around the world for a long time. But one of the things that Jim and I did was that we sort of reintroduced them to the art world in the early 1990s. I was always in textile arts, and I found gourds that were being used by basket people. But we could not find any good books that were written. So I talked with my friend Jim White-S, who's up in Berkeley, and said, let's get together and do some books, or a book. So he talked with a friend who's a publisher in Asheville, North Carolina, and they said, can we get them a manuscript in 6 months? So we contacted artists and we did a lot of research, and we came up with this book, which is called The Complete Book of Gourd Craft. It was published in actually 1995, and it is quite amazingly still in print today. It has been translated, and it is known around the world. After this book, and it was quite popular from the time that it was first published, people started saying, this is fine, except what else can you do with a gourd? Because it was somewhat limited. We only had 35 projects, 22 projects, but examples of art from artists around the world. So the next book that I published myself was Gourds in Your Garden. A gourd is a cucurbit. It's in the pumpkin family, pumpkins and melons. So when you look at gardening plants, when you clean out a gourd, you have lots of seeds. When you look at gardening books, they say, see pumpkin or see melon, but gourds are different. The thing that makes them unique is that when they dry, when a melon or a squash gets old and dry, it rots. With a gourd, what happens is that all of the moisture on the inside of it seeps out, and that waxy surface gets a little bit moldy. It's really a protective cover, and when you wash that off, you can polish it, and you can sort of hear those seeds on the inside. Imagine your dried out pumpkin with the seeds inside. If you cut that open and clean it out, you have a perfect, wonderful wooden bowl. And this is what cultures have treasured and used in so many different ways. One of my projects when I was traveling around the world was to go into different cultures and see how they've been used. In Africa, This is just in the markets. They have stacks and stacks of these because they use them as mixing bowls. They use them for carrying water. They use them for any number of storage purposes. In Suriname, which is in a small country in South America, they put holes in the bottom and they use them as a strainer.
And they don't, they stay like that forever? I mean, they don't disintegrate?
No, the only thing that's going to happen is that the bugs might get them or the rodents might get them and start to chew on them. So at my house, I used to have piles of gourds, and I would have to protect them from the rats because I think the rats and the squirrels figured that I was put on this earth to give them a very good home. And I had to convince them that these were not rats' homes, they were mine. They would have to find something else. One of the original early uses for a gourd was to just cut a hole in the side. This was also from the Amazon basin in South America, and they would just haul their water back and forth. And they do this in just about every culture. They're still doing it in the Amazon. They're still doing that in Africa, just for watering their plants and carrying things around. If you go into the markets in West Africa particularly, you will see women carrying these things on their head. And this is just their Tupperware, it's their utility basket for carrying things around.
It's amazing.
Well, you can see they're very sturdy.
Yeah, and they're not that heavy.
They are very lightweight.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness.
Right, but they're very durable. Now, in addition to being utilitarian, they were used particularly by musicians. This is a wonderful rattle. It has a bone handle. This is from South America, but they have these in Africa as well, where they're usually filled with small rocks or with small seeds. Native American Indians would also use them a lot, just as their rattle. Then we have examples of drums, of kora, which is a musical instrument that it was very popular, particularly in West Africa. The thumb piano, just because the gourd is such a nice resonator. And so you can, depending upon the size of the gourd itself, you can get wonderful resonance. And this was something that was exploited and used by cultures everywhere.
How old are gourds?
Thousands of years.
Thousands.
Literally thousands of years. They have been found in Egyptian tombs because they were used as, some of the images in Egyptian tombs are women carrying gourds on their heads. So we know that they have been used for such a long time.
But Ginger, I think it's so interesting that they grow in so many different shapes.
Yes.
I mean, like these look like they're, perfectly round.
Yes.
Yeah.
There are hundreds of shapes, and at one point when I was working on this book, Gourds in Your Garden, I was trying to identify and standardize what are the typical normal sizes, shapes of gourds. And I finally gave up because gourd farmers, and there are many gourd farmers, particularly on the East Coast, that were saying the different shapes hybridize. And so it's very hard to keep a consistent shape. Also, the thickness of the gourd makes a difference, so that some particular gourds have a very thick shell. Some of them have a very thin shell. Some of them have a very long neck. These are the dipper gourds. And some of them are just short and squat, like this one. And so when you go to a gourd farm, and there used to be many in the Central Valley in California, the challenge was always just walking through the fields and finding a shape that was going to exactly excite you as far as what your next project was going to be.
Yeah. But I can't believe this is all your work. Why don't you put her up here?
One of the things that I try to emphasize to people is that gourds, anything that you can do on paper, on leather, or on wood, you can do on a gourd. So that means you can paint just, what I do is to clean off and sand the surface and then put on a base coat, and then you can paint it with any kind of paint that you want. This one happens to be painted with acrylics, I believe. And I give them to children to paint because there's so many different shapes and sizes, and the kids can get very excited creating their own little creatures with them. I also used to go into women's prisons, and they would like to paint or make designs on them just because it's so easy and the shape of the gourd inspires you. So some of them are just painted. This one was painted, but also she was, this one is a combination of lots and lots of different gourds that were then cut and put together. I wanted to make a series of the 4 seasons. So I have Christmas and then winter, spring. This little lady is summer, and then I have another autumn.
So is this a natural, this particular piece?
These pieces here were from a dipper gourd. That means one with a very long handle.
Yeah.
And these little parts of her sleeve were from another kind of small gourd. And I could just cut them, glue them back together again, the way I wanted them, and then paint them. Sometimes carving and sometimes not. And then in this little container, there are all of these are gourds, and they're all the different sizes. You can range from very, very tiny to quite large.
It's just, I'm just blown away by this, as you know.
The nice thing about gourds is that it's the gourd itself that inspires you. It's the gourd that gives you ideas. And I used to walk through the gourd fields with my husband, and he would say, what are you going to do with these? And start talking. And I would just say, be quiet, because the gourd is telling me what I'm supposed to do. And so you just have to listen to your gourds.
But tell about that one.
This one was a gourd that was made for one of the books. This is Mother Goose. I used to be a teacher, and I wanted to have lots of small gourds that I could share with children. She would have a little book on her feet and glasses, and then when you open up her wing, she has many, many small gourds in it to represent lots of different children's stories. So, lots of things in here, but okay, oh, here's Mother Goose's glasses so that she could read her stories. But that was part of the play, that gourds can be serious art or they can just be for the fun of it.
Yeah.
Right.
And you made this too, from scratch?
Oh, yes.
Oh.
And the nice thing about this little gourd is that she can be turned upside down, so that this is little Bo Peep has lost her sheep. And so when you're reading to children, then the sheep will come after.
How did the kids react to this?
Well, the nice thing, I used to be a special education teacher for young children, and the nice thing about gourds is that they are so flexible that children can play with them and paint them and turn them into their characters that are just as satisfying and just as pleasing as another artist can be doing something much more serious. Let me just, as long as we have a few minutes, I'll show you some of the other techniques that you can do with a gourd. You can.
Which one do you want?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, this one is wood burning, using a simple wood burning tool that you buy in the craft store. And then I used pastel oil colors just to color the flowers. And it's very easy. You don't have to go out and buy a lot of special tools and special equipment. You can just get them at your local craft store. My background was weaving, and so I would put a warp just by threading strings on the outside of this particular gourd and then weaving a design around the edge.
So you can put many of your talents on one gourd.
Oh, yes.
But nobody's talented like you, I'm sorry.
Oh, yes, they are. One thing is that the gourd will tell you what to do. And the nice thing about a gourd, too, is that it's very forgiving, so that whatever you do, it's going to end up looking very, very nice. This was in a book where I used a carving tool, a Dremel, which is readily available at your craft store. I carved the background away. I painted it with copper paint, embedded some turquoise, and made a Native American design on this one, just because the Native Americans did use a lot of gourds.
It's so interesting because when you gave your talk about gourds at the forum, I had never even thought of a gourd or what it was about.
Right.
So how can people become educated, like my being so uneducated in this field?
Well, hopefully you'll be in a place where you can find them that will be maybe in craft exhibits and craft shows and fairs today. But unfortunately, there are not that many people who are continuing to work with gourds, at least on the West Coast. This is another example of how gourds were used historically to make the calabash pipe. The Spanish word for gourd was calabash, and so the pipe was the calabash pipe because it was made from the neck of a gourd.
And it's tell how old gourds are.
Gourds are thousands of years old. Thousands of years, right.
Now, can you develop a certain kind of gourd or not? I mean, you just have to take what comes up.
Well, I think that if you work very hard, you could probably hybridize a particular shape.
That's what.
But what makes more sense is to just go to a gourd farm, and they have piles, acres of gourds, and you just walk through the fields and pick out the shape that speaks to you. Because a lot of times you can't predict what's going to be exciting and work hard to create that shape. It's more fun to just walk through the field and get inspiration from what is there.
Yeah. How many gourds have you made in your life? About?
Oh dear. Well, probably hundreds.
Really?
Because I used to teach a lot, and I particularly like to teach young kids, and I like to teach people who don't have confidence in themselves as artists, just because there are so many things that you can do that are quite easy and still come out with something that is pleasurable, that gives you joy, and it's fun for other people to see as well. So I like to work, basically I'm a teacher.
And basically you're self-taught, too.
Well, yes, too.
I mean, with everything. You've got to tell, we did a show last month on felt art.
Right.
I mean, so you incorporate all these different kinds of art, and you go crazy with them.
Well, but if you like to work with your hands, it's nice to have a raw material, like a gourd, that will suggest to you what it might want to have on it, what you can do with it. And you don't have to bring a particular skill. You don't have to have a lot of training in this kind of thing. It's not expensive to buy a gourd, and it's nice to just play. There's no stress, there's no effort to get it perfect or to get it exactly right, and you can just play with it. And there's such a variety of things that you can do with a gourd that nothing is wrong.
And this is such a perfect example of that,
right.
like this. I mean, I just go nuts over this. I really do. I mean, all of it. It's. I wouldn't want to do this, and I wouldn't want to do the felting. It's too hard, really.
Right.
It's very hard. Tell what else you've made. No, the instruments.
Okay. I did, whenever I go on travels, I like to pick up I like to see what other cultures have done. And so most common is the drum. And you can find very large drums. Can I come around this way and just show? Oops. There.
Oh my
In
goodness.
Africa, let's see, I'll bring these two around.
And they're pretty lightweight, aren't they?
Oh, yeah.
That's what's so great about that, too.
You can make drums of all different shapes and sizes. This is a particularly large one that's in Africa. It's in Ghana, and they use it for introducing royalty. They will have a parade, and special men in the culture will be the drummers, and they will wear these and march as the chief.
Why does it have such a good sound?
Because the gourd is a natural resonator, and that is why it has been popular throughout the world. Now, when I'm teaching how to make a gourd, I use goat skin. I use a nice round gourd. I cut it off, and the children are able to stretch the goat skin around and then secure it to the gourd itself. And after a day, when it dries, then they will come up with a lovely sounding instrument. Isn't that nice?
It is. It has such a natural tone.
Yes. And gourd drums are literally found around the world. Asia.
Did you make that one?
No, this one came from Ghana.
Okay.
Right.
Which is the one you made?
No, I didn't bring it. But this is another very familiar, if you've been to Hawaii, the ipu and the ipu heke. They use this when they're doing the hula. And what this is a combination of two gourds. They're turned upside down and glued next to each other. And then the men are usually playing these when they're kneeling on the floor, tapping this on a pad and then banging it with the bottom of their hand while they're dancing. And it has a nice resonant quality to itself.
It does. Now, how many years have you done the gourds?
I started in the 1990s, and then I continued working on them. We worked on 8 books, and you were an author of 8 books, and then you did this. Well, plus you're weaving, you're spinning, but
all of that.
With each gourd book, we were trying to emphasize a different subject. So we have a book on gourd musical instruments. We have a book of gourds combined with basketry. We have one book that's just gourds and spirit figures from around the world, because Asians have a particular kind of spirit figure, Africans do, Native American Indians do, that type of thing. And then, let's see, we did put together a CD of, after we came out with a book on gourd musical instruments, people enjoyed the book very much, but they said, and what is that instrument supposed to sound like? So we did put together a CD, which is the tape, showing, and it has 22 tracks on it, showing this is the instrument and this is what it sounds like after it's been made. So it gave people confidence of when they were making something, what it was supposed to eventually turn out like.
Wow.
Right.
What would you suggest to, this is kind of on the subject but off the subject, but a budding artist in any medium? But I mean, if I saw this, I'd say I can't touch that. There's just no way I could do it. And in all the different fields, the genres of art, what advice could you give the budding artist?
The thing I like about gourds the most is that all you have to do is to listen to the gourd. The gourd will tell you what to do. And you don't really have to bring a particular skill or a talent. You just have to be able to listen. When you have a gourd that's shaped like this, and if it did not have this netting over it with the beads, this is another musical instrument, but you could cut off the neck and you would have a lovely bowl. And maybe you could paint this, or maybe you could put something around the neck of the gourd. There are just so many ways that you can enhance that shape to make it something that is personal to you. And you can paint it, you can carve it, you can put beads on it, You can bring any kind of embellishment to it that you want. I have yet to, the thing that's such a pleasure about teaching gourd art is that everybody is always thrilled. You never find somebody who's disappointed.
Well, that's very good advice. So maybe a person says, I want to be an artist, and this would be a wonderful medium, wouldn't it?
It is a wonderful way to just get started from very young age to
an older people. Yeah.
Right.
Well, guess what? Ginger, we've run out of time. We're going to have to do a third show.
Oh, dear.
Oh, my goodness. I just cannot thank you enough.
Well, I am so thrilled to be able to share my passions.
Well, you're so talented. You were mayor of Los Altos Hills. You're a teacher, you're an author, and God knows you must sleep 4 hours, 24 hours. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you so much for letting me come to share my interest.
Well, we got to think of another show, too. And, of course, I want to thank my lovely, fabulous crew. We've all been together for a long time, right? And I want to thank KMVT. It's such a wonderful station. And, of course, I couldn't have the show without you darling viewers. So I'm really a drama queen. So I have to get ready for this. This is the most fun thing. Guess what? I can't wait to see you next time. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.